So today we are very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Capila, who is a social worker. But I'm going to let her introduce herself briefly, and we'll get started. So go right ahead. Tell us what is the best way you would describe yourself? Um, Go for it. It's all yours.
Yeah, so Rama, can I refer to you as Rama?
Of course, certainly.
Okay. So Rama, I grew up in a progressive family. My father was a very eminent architect in New Delhi in India, and art culture were of great value in our household. I learned music early when I was growing up, and when I finished my school and had to choose a career in higher education, I was very fascinated by the Lady Irvine College, which was set up by outstanding women who had fought for India's freedom. And they had a great value for higher education as an outlet for women's empowerment. So the Lady Irvine College was set up in 1932 by Lady Irvine when India was still ruled by the British. And Sarojini Naidu, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, and eminent women who were part of the freedom movement had set up this women's college. So this is quite like the Seven Sisters, which are like Bryn Mawr and Smith. So it's a great institution. So I went to college, and when I finished my undergraduate, there was a choice to do 5 masters in textiles or nutrition. So it's a college of human ecology, like the same model as the state colleges in the U.S. So like Michigan has a college of human ecology, Iowa State. So it's modeled on that. So I chose to do my master's in rural community extension because I think the premise was that if you don't know the context and the issues that concern your country, then how do you understand what is going on at the grassroots level? How do you understand the people? And Gandhiji had said that 80% of India lives in its villages. So I was very inspired by that saying. And I really wanted to understand the cultural and the socio-cultural context of people and communities that lived in resource settings other than the one that I grew up in.
Wow, that is so fascinating. What inspired you to go into this field or choose this as a career? Was it one incidence, or more of a process for you?
It was, Rama, more of a process because what happens is when you're in an academic career, publish or perish, as you know, is a very important aspect. So if you don't publish, and having that prefix added to your name, the PhD, at least for tenure position, is very important. So there was a lot of pressure on me to do a PhD, but I was not fascinated by, I taught communication. So I should make it clear that I taught communication, social and behavior change, and how communication is important for reaching people and communities. And so I was not fascinated by all the topics that I could, think of in New Delhi. So in 1992, what happened is with 3 other women, I went for a trek to the mountains, not for any religious purposes, to the temple shrines of Kedarnath and Badrinath, but just, to explore the Himalayas. And on one day, the vehicle in which we were traveling got a puncture. The tire got punctured, and the driver said, "Would you like to sit on the roadside and savor the beautiful view of the Himalayas while I fix the car?" And while I was sitting looking at the Himalayan snow peaks, I heard 2 women singing from the hills. So one was singing and the other was answering. And I'd like to just sing 2 lines of that song to illustrate to you how I got transfixed and how my life changed. Sana kuredi purpurandi uchinichi dandyoma tumbena swami but mare janyo gehri kadnuma. I heard this song, Rama, and I had goosebumps. I was just totally transformed. I didn't know what she was singing. Just the sound, the pentatonic sound moving from one hill to the other, and the other, her friend, answering her. When they came down to the roadhead, they were carrying a heavy load of fodder on their heads for fuel wood for their families. So I turned around to the woman and I said, "Your song was so beautiful. What were you singing?" And she was tired and she turned and said to me, "What do you have to do with my song?" And these words totally enrolled me into her life. I felt, okay, I'm come here as a tourist. I'm just here to see the beauty of nature and the geographical landscape in which she lives, but I know nothing about her. So when I reached the other temple shrine of Badrinath, I asked the reception for a piece of paper and pen, and I jotted down 10 lines that I would like to study the songs of the women of the mountains and understand their lives through their songs. Now, I'm not the first person in the world to document. Folk songs have been documented all over the world. But perhaps the unique aspect was to understand women's lives through their songs. And when I came back, the Board of Research Studies gave me a leave to do my PhD for 3 years. And I went back to the mountains and I lived with the community, with the women. I walked with them to the forest. I listened to their songs. I recorded their songs. And this was my PhD, my first book, Images of Women in the Folk Songs of Garhwal Himalayas, which was published in 2002. So this was actually the precursor to my journey to the Ganga also.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And did you finally find out what the translation to that lovely song?
Yeah, so migration is very rampant in the mountains because there is no occupation for men to remain in that environment. So men normally migrate to the metropolitan cities in India, and women are left alone in this environment. So she's saying that the mist is coming up, the beautiful landscape, and I feel I see you, but I know you are not here because you are far away. And without you, I feel like jumping into this beautiful gorge and becoming one with the nature. So there is a lot of lament and longing in this song. It's a beautiful song, but it also reflects the status of women in that society. So that's what I was getting at through these 150 songs that I collected. And they're all in my book. They've been translated by me from the local Garhwali language to Hindi first and then to English. But they all talk about different aspects of women's lives.
And you've been in this field for a little bit over 3 decades.
Yes.
So what keeps you here, as opposed to straying into other fields of study or other things? What keeps you?
This field is related to human beings. And I feel that the more I understand human beings and their histories and their geographies and who they are, the more connected I feel to people, the more I identify with the larger aspect of human beings and the human person. So what connects me to this is that this is also very unique in the way that the methodology that I adopt for my work is very participatory. I don't superimpose my interpretations onto what people have said. And listening to people, so if you were to ask me to sum up my entire work of 3 decades, the word that resonates the most with me is listening. That's the most important word. Listen to people's wisdom. Listen to what they are saying. Listen to their stories. Listen to their narratives. Listen to their myths. And then create a voice that resonates their voices. And that's what I'm doing. I'm sharing this with the world. It's actually not I'm just a facilitator, an instrument. I happen to be a vehicle or a channel of reaching their voices to people in different parts of the world. And I feel very happy doing it. And when I complete a book, I take it back to the community. Like the river sings now, it's complete. I will be taking it back to the river valley. And I will sit with the women and show how significant a part of this journey they have been.
Right. And do you find that they enjoy that?
They enjoy that a lot. They feel so, they identify. The biggest thing is, when I said to them that I've come here to listen to your song, they felt that it was their communication channel that I had hooked onto. Because, when we are listening to television or radio or the other media channels, we are listening to somebody else's creation. Mm-hmm. Somebody thought out that whole process, and you then become, in a way, a passive receiver of that, while you understand it and listen to it. But in this case, what is very significant about this work is that women and people of the community are very active participants in this whole process. Right. So it is not so driven by me as it is more people-centric, mm-hmm. human-centric, or grassroots-centric.
And this is, of course, what we're talking about now is your latest book. You've written quite a few. So this is your latest book, A River Sings, right? And so tell us briefly about it. And it's a large book. It's a lot of work that went into this. So if you had to sum it all up, like what is this book about? And why should people be interested and fascinated to read?
Yeah. So, Rama, in the summer, in the spring of 2017, I had a dream, and a goddess-like figure emerged in that dream, dressed in white, and said to me, Anjali, just like you have recorded the songs of the women of the mountains, listen to my song too. I too sing. I too have a song. I too have a voice. And I just got up thinking that who was she? It was a goddess, it was an ephemeral kind of figure, and it just disappeared. So the next day, I put pen to paper and wrote a proposal for a very important cultural body since I had retired from the university. It's called the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. And they have a project called Documenting Riverine Cultures. So I wrote a proposal that I would like to study the Himalayan river. So I have only looked at 350 kilometers of the river, whereas the river runs for 2,500 kilometers on India's hinterland and goes all the way to Calcutta and to the Bay of Bengal. So I have only studied the Himalayan river from Gangotri to Haridwar. And I wanted to listen to the lives of people who live on the banks of the river. So it's like a symbiotic relationship. What do they feel about the river? How do they rever the river? It is a sacred river, and it is worshipped by Hindus and Indians all the time. In fact, when we die, our ashes are also immersed in the river for universal salvation and the final journey of liberation. But more than that, I want to understand from people, and women particularly, how they view the river that they live nearby. So that is what was my guiding principle.
And I know you have, as we mentioned before, you've written several books. There's a lot of different works that you've done over your course of your work for 30 years or so. But how do you feel this particular work, A River Sings, is different and unique as compared to your previous works?
So this work is unique also because, since it was a large area that I covered, I had a wonderful student body team. And this would also interest you that, students from the Michigan State University, I ran a study abroad program from my college with Michigan State University in the US in Michigan for 20 years. So every year, 4 or 5 American students who had opted for the study abroad would come in the spring semester and stay with us in India and travel and do their internships, and they would get 24 credits for that.
Oh, wow.
So when I started this program, the students from Michigan State University in 2017, in the summer, they came, and I had 4 students from my college. So 8 students plus some volunteers. I encouraged, people who were working for not-for-profit organizations in Delhi, young people, to shadow me and travel along with me to the river. So we had at least a group of 10 people who were traveling together, and we followed a very democratic process. So what we would do when we would hear women singing in the community, we would record that song, and the students from the Lady Urban College would translate the song from the local language into Hindi and then into English, and then share it with the American students. So, and in the evening, we would all sit together and we would read out the English translation of the song. And then through a democratic process, we would say that the dominant theme in this song is about lamenting for the dam of the river, damming the river. Or the dominant theme is the journey of the river. Or the dominant theme is talking about a festival along the river. So the unique aspect of this book is that the themes that emerged into 5 themes, which are there in the book, and I will narrate them to you. The first theme is mythology, journey, and worship of the river. The second theme is festivals along the river. The third theme is women's integral relationship with the river, how they relate to it. What is their psychosocial connect and how do they relate to the river? The fourth theme was the ecological perspectives, because biodiversity and the ecology of the river is very important. A lot of deforestation is taking place. Trees are being cut along the riverbed, and forests are being denuded. So there's less water in the tributaries and less water in the river. So all this affects the ecology of the river. And the last section was, there were many songs that reflected the modernity and change, which was like migration, commercialization, and tourism in the name of religion, and liberalization and globalization and how that has impacted the river. So the book really is very contemporary. While it talks about tradition, it is a culmination of both tradition and modernity. It refers to many sustainable development aspects which are linked to the lives of the river.
And how long? I know you. So you've been taking students, and you've been doing a field trip in this area for a number of years. But how many years would you say of work did you do specifically for this book, for putting this together?
So 2 years for the summer internship. I had students in 2017 and 2018, and in 19 I started writing the book. So it took me about, then the pandemic happened, as you know, in 2020. So it took me about 2 years to put together this magnum opus together. And the translations have been done by a very well-known young woman called Bhavna Pankaj, who is also a journalist and a writer. So she translated the songs from Hindi to English. And the Garhwali to Hindi was done by a scholar in that region. So I wanted to, not miss out on the nuances, because sometimes language takes over and you are not able to connect with the right meaning.
Yes.
So I wanted all that to be in order.
Right. Yeah, that's very that's very fascinating. Do you think that the women in this area that you spoke with, and the general people living there, they're used to tourists, or they were welcoming, or or surprised by your American students who joined in?
They were very happy actually to see the American students, because I was so fascinated by the way the American students were welcomed into the temple, into the shrine. Mm-hmm. So on one occasion, the priest of the Gangotri temple, where the river comes down, that is at an altitude of 10,000 feet above sea level. So that is the main temple shrine where we started our journey at Gangotri. So the priest invited me to wash the feet of the goddess, of the image. And that was a great honor, because, normally the priest does it himself. So I asked him if I could take my American and Indian students also into the Sanctum Sanctorum, and he said, of course. So I was sitting and washing the feet, and they were touching some part of my body as though to get that embodiment through me as a conduit of worship and reverence. And after we washed her feet, we were blessed by the priest in the temple, and I took a circumambulation of the temple. And when I came out, people who were waiting in line to go to the shrine, they started touching my feet. And I was just about taken aback. I said, I'm nobody, I'm just a human person. Please don't do this. Please don't go to the shrine and touch the feet of the goddess. And then the priest corrected me. He said, Anjali, at this moment, because Ganga, the goddess, has blessed you, they are seeing you as an embodiment of the Divine Mother. So don't feel offended. Think of another way of looking at yourself, because we all just look at ourselves as a human body.
Right, right.
And so I was learning all the time. What I want to share with you is that every moment was a learning process, Rama.
Right.
That even if we feel we know, we really don't know where knowledge comes from, where revelations come from, and what are the thought processes and perceptions of communities different from ours. And I think this was a great learning, both for the Indian students, for me, and for the American students. Because when they left India, they said that their lives had been altered in more ways than one. Oh. And they're all so excited about getting the book. They want, each one of them is part of this book.
Right. And the poems and the songs that you document in this work, do you have a particular, if you had to pick one, do you have a particular favorite, or one that really resonates with you?
Yeah, I do have a particular favorite one, Rama. And that is, when the dam was built, apparently 125 villages were submerged and people lost their homes when the dam was built. So I'll read just a little bit of the English translation. Teary, the land of my birth is dying. My home that once was is dying. Swirling water, swallow up hut and hamlet. Friends of infancy recede. Tombstone stories told by the old mother alone will live. Games of childhood have gone into eternal hiding. How shall we seek them now? Alas, the thief is won. Courtyards dappled by love of mothers. sanctuary of fathers, have been swamped away. Where songs of joy once filled the air, windows called out to streets, and people sat in rows to eat, life flooded and forlorn. So this song really resonates with me because, we are talking about displacement of communities. And when displacement happens, when large dams are built for the sake of development, people get affected. And those that are displaced, their courtyards, their lovely homes where they grew up. And this song talks about the loss of that home. And that's
And
why
right. And I'm
there's,
sure there's an environmental and ecological impact as well that follows.
yeah, a huge ecological impact because women's lives are affected by displacement, and so is the family displaced. And now they have been given a small matchbox-like homes to settle in a new place, which is not at all like their own mountain habitat, which was open and had different uses of space and functionality. So their lives are so different. And you can't do that when you remove people from their physical spaces and offer them alternate homes in the name of development. You take away a lot of their own sacred space.
And so, how would you best describe the sociology of the women in particular in the River Valley, of the segment that you have done through your studies? What is the sociology there for them?
The sociology is what is very significant for them, Rama, is that, this is a sacred landscape. And I think the sacredness permeates their way of being and their way of thinking because they see the river as a goddess. So rivers are feminine and they worship her as a mother. So the mother image is very strong. In fact, when I went to the temple town where the image of the goddess is brought during the winter months, because when the snowfall comes, she is removed from Gangotri to 30 kilometers down to another natal town where she was born, which is her birthplace. So the goddess is brought to that temple, and the women in that area sing a lot in reverence to the mother. So I would like to sing 2 lines of a song which they sang. गंगा मेरी प्यारी माँ भगवती तू धनी बजाया राजा भगीरथ ने मेरी तपस्या करी माँ स्वर्ग पिटी लाई माँ भगवती तू धनी बजाया. Oh beloved Ganga, you are my mother. May you be benevolent and grant me a boon to always love you and to care for you as you flow through this eternal land, O goddess, O mother divine. So this is what was very, very significant is, and this would definitely describe the sociology of the women in the Ganga River Valley, is the sacredness of the river, which they internalize, and it really permeates every aspect of their life.
Well, yeah, that's fascinating. I think I have just one last question for you, which is that you've through the years given many presentations, throughout the U.S. Especially. And do you have, or do you recollect an incident or something that surprised you during one of your presentations? Maybe something one of your attendees said, or something that was different and surprising.
Yeah, it was. So this I'm going to refer to the American Association of Family and Consumer Sciences meeting at Knoxville in Tennessee in 2009. And I had gone with the professor from the Michigan State University, and I was invited as an international guest. And I was invited to speak at a luncheon. That itself was, something new for me. And people who were attending my talk had to pay $60 for the lunch as well as to listen to me. So the whole setting was in a lovely hotel. I think it was Knoxville Hilton or whatever. And there were about 70, 80 people who had come to this. I was talking on my work, reinforcing faith in women's wisdom, building human capital. It was like, this is like social capital. When you're building up capital, like you build up finance, this is social capital. You're reinforcing faith in women's wisdom. And I was going to show through my presentation a few illustrations on how women in the mountains are empowered and how they have brought wisdom to their communities and to the different generations. So after my presentation finished, I was suddenly surrounded by so many people, Rama. It was like I was just in the center of something which I didn't know was happening. Because, sometimes you feel that what you're saying may not resonate with American audiences. And they all were so fascinated. And they said, Anjali, this was just wonderful. We identified with the women so much. And the fact that they are empowering not only themselves, but the next generation through their wisdom. This is absolutely fascinating. I think it was really, like to say, an aha moment for me. I was just taken aback by the love and the affection that the audience showed me after this presentation. So when you connect with people, when you reach out to them and they understand you, I think it is a great moment of communication and togetherness.
And what are some next steps? So what's next for you?
So the body that funded this research, the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, as I said, they have a project called Documenting Riverine Cultures. Another idea was to do the sister river of Ganga, which is the Yamuna, which is again, runs through New Delhi and has a long history. It is not worshipped and revered as much as the river Ganga is. But I do want to study the lives of people who live along this river and how is it different from this river and what are the different aspects and unique aspects of that river, which I need to look into. So one is that. And the other idea I have is to look at mountain habitats. Mm-hmm. So the materials with which they use to build their homes, like clay and mud and sand and stone and wood. And how is the household reflective of their lives, and how do they design different spaces for use, and what does the house mean to them as an expression of their lived experience? So another idea was, these are the two ideas that I'm mulling with at the moment, to look at mountain habitats in the Himalayan communities and maybe to study the river and see the differences from the Ganga River.
Right. And so it's an interesting thing. So the source for the Ganga is actually from a glacier.
Yeah.
Right. So Gangotri is actually a large glacier from where the primary source of the river comes from. Yes, exactly. And that glacier is also melting at a rapid rate. So there are certainly a lot of changes for mountain habitats coming down the pike.
Yeah, in fact, in this book, I have an illustration of a 5-story home, which is 500 years old and has withstood 11 earthquakes because of its architectural style and design, and made by traditional artists who are no longer finding space for their knowledge and their wisdom in building materials, because the reinforced concrete and the modern flat roofs are taking over as a norm, as a symbol of development and modernization. And the traditional home is losing its value in this society too. So I think it would be very interesting with the changing climate change and global warming and the glacial melts that are happening to study the impact on the mountain habitats.
Not to mention the earthquakes. Those as well. Well, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say that I'm so happy to be speaking to you, Rama, and that I could share the wisdom of the people of the river and of the mountains. And I bring to you greetings from the Himalayan mountains of India, and hope that my work resonates with people, and that young students who are following a career in higher education now in the universities, even in the US, can think of looking at folklore studies and sociology and anthropology and communication as very viable career options.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.